Hey, how's everybody doing today? Well, as you can probably hear, this is what I get to deal with almost every night. Now, this was being recorded right next to my pillow of the bed that I lay in when I try to rest and sleep at night. This is the noise that I get to hear every night almost. This is the noise that's against the law. This is the noise coming from the businesses that the local public servants are protecting. See, when this first started up, back in 2018, there was someone else at City Hall prior to Donald Mason taking office. His name is Jeff Tilton. Now, as I began investigating this whole situation, I became aware that, first of all, one of the sources of the noise, one of the most disturbing sources of the noise, is Casting Solutions. Well, I found out shortly after that Jeff Tilton, the former mayor, had worked for Casting Solutions for something like 40 years at some point. And so it became evident to me that it may be a pay for play type of a situation, or the company finally got their man in the correct position to be able to make changes to the local government, whether lawful or not, to protect the company. A clear sign of nepotism. Because anyone that works for a company for nearly 40 years, more than likely is retired, more than likely is pulling a pension. I wouldn't be surprised if they had stock options or something like that. A part of profit shares, that sort of thing. So at the time, I could see how it would be in Jeff Tilton's best interest to protect the company. Because he'd be protecting his pension, he'd be protecting his former employer, buddies, friends, possibly family members that work out there too. So early on in this, I became aware of potential nepotism. And it really seems to be rampant in these small cities and small towns. Because not only do you have a situation like that where a former employee for a number of years becomes a mayor or is put in a position of so-called authority and ends up making decisions to protect the ones causing harm because of their buddies. It's classic nepotism. So not only do we have that in City Hall, but then look at the fact that, there was a dude in a black dress named William Joseph that uh, headed up the municipal court. Old dude with a white mustache. And then amazingly, Andrew Joseph, who just so happens to have the actual same name, because he goes by his middle name as his first, but the son of the former is now in the same position. Now see, if these people were trustworthy and honorable, see, an honorable man or woman would not take the position just on the fact that to avoid any appearance of nepotism or any immoral or unethical activities. But these people have no problem with it. In fact, the first time I went to the courthouse after the son took the position, several people, I didn't even say anything. I didn't even bat an eye. I didn't even know what was going on, that they had changed the position, or that the person in the position had changed. Before I even said anything or made a remark or anything, I had people telling me, oh, it's not nepotism. Oh, it's not nepotism. People that work for the court representatives telling me, it's not nepotism. It's not nepotism. No, it's not nepotism. Trying to convince me that it wasn't nepotism. If they have to work that hard to convince people that it's not nepotism, then it probably is. Because if it's not, then on the face of it, it's not, and nobody has to run interference or run protection for the situation, because on the face of it, it would be true and factual. No one will question it. But because it is nepotism, these people had to go out of their way to convince myself and others, or at least attempt to convince us that it wasn't nepotism. How could it not be? I mean, even if the governor of the state chose who to put in that position, I mean, let's face it, they're all buddies in one way or another. They're all bar registered attorneys. So they have that commonality. So even if they don't know each other personally, the fact that they're all part of the bar association means that they gotta look out for each other, protect each other. It's a code, kind of like a thin blue line, or the blue line, or whatever the hell they call it, where it's basically just brainwashing to tell cops to cover up for other cops. You know, don't report your buddies, don't report crimes or harm that's being caused by their buddies, because that would go against that thin blue line. These people are really no different, they're no better than criminals, street criminals. The sad part is they run around acting like they're heroes. Acting like they actually provide a service to the community. When if you actually look at the situation, they're really not doing anything besides creating their own revenue streams. a majority of the people that I saw in the courts weren't there because someone else was harmed or injured. They were there because someone like Michael Hughes or Ronald Welch or Lynch. Welch, that's his name. Excuse me, people like Ronald Welch and Michael T. Hughes speak on behalf of imaginary friends and make things up. And they take advantage of the system that they are part of to destroy people's lives. Because they're not going to be held accountable. The appeals court, they don't care. Hell, the appeals court doesn't even care what's written in the briefs or in the actual information in the body of the documents. They're too busy looking for any stipulation to reject the filing. Oh, you didn't send this form with your filing? Oh, therefore we're not even going to bother reading it. Therefore we're not even going to bother acknowledging it. Therefore you lose. It's ridiculous. That's how you can tell they're pure administrative procedures. Because they care less, or they could care less about, they couldn't care less about the harm being caused. Yeah, so I guess let me ask you all, if any of you are intelligent enough to answer. Where in the state codes or even the local codes does it allow for something like this? Because out of all of the codes that I read, it only mentioned about activities pertaining to like city infrastructure being permitted to disturb the peace. But even then, it's only a temporary thing. It's not like they're authorized to disturb the peace all the time just because it's an activity of the city government. Because see, I think what most of you fail to recognize and realize is that these public servants work for us. They don't work for themselves. They may get paid by the city. And they may technically work for the city, but they also technically work for us, the people. They're supposed to provide services to the people. In fact, they were originally created to push back on corporations so that way private men and women didn't have to. They were created to be the intermediary in situations to prevent private men and women from being forced into the public, to address situations like this. Because the police departments, the city government was charged with handling these types of issues. And so here we have a situation where the city workers, people at City Hall, people at the police department, people in the courthouse, they think that they're above all of us. They think they have more rights. They think they have more privileges. They think that they have more authority. Well, the only reason they think that is because the people here around the Zanesville area are cowards. They won't admit it to themselves because they want to convince themselves that they're something other than a coward. But quite frankly, all of my neighbors around here that can hear the same noise, that don't bother to complain about it, that don't bother to say anything about it, they're cowards. But when you have a population that has an average IQ, lower than the amount of teeth in the human mouth, I guess that starts to make more sense. It starts to paint a picture where it's easier to understand why it is that people act the way that they do. But yeah, to all these neighbors around here that don't bother saying anything because they don't want to get involved, or they feel like it's not the best thing for the city, or whatever the hell that their feeble little minds think. Frankly, you all are the cowards. I'm man enough to stand up by myself and push back against these ridiculous public servants. I don't need any of you. It'd be nice if you all would help, but it is what it is. At this point, I really frankly don't care, because here soon I won't be in this godforsaken little city anymore. You all can have your brain damage, and I'll go on about my life much, much, much wealthier than I was before. Because incompetent fools claiming to be law enforcement, claiming to be public servants, don't know what the hell they're doing. So ultimately, I really don't care if they do what they're supposed to do at this point. And the only reason I'm even making these recordings is just for records. So that way when and if the liens are created against these companies, well, there'll be evidence of why. No, I think I finally see clearly why my grandfather left this area. I never understood why he would leave a smaller city like this to go to Columbus. But now I can see why. It's quieter in Columbus. And hell, back then the area that he moved to was a lot better anyways. Less trash, less trashy people. The last 50 years or so has really had a huge change for the worse for parts of Columbus, especially on the east side. Communities that used to be well taken care of and property owners took care of their properties are now run down, dilapidated, trash everywhere. Really too bad. But back then, say 50, 60, 70 years ago, I'm sure this kind of nepotism and activity that I'm experiencing now was probably much worse back then. With less communications, cities and towns being more isolated back then, it being harder for people to get the word out about criminal activity within the police departments and city governments. Back then they didn't have internet, they didn't have things like YouTube. They didn't have devices that they could record on like we have nowadays. We had devices back then, but they weren't anything like what we have today. They were huge machines that most families couldn't afford. Computers, cameras. Hell, it wasn't until the turn of the century that cameras became handheld. For the longest time, the best cameras were those huge shoulder carried cameras that the television stations would carry around. It wasn't until after around the year 2000 when they started coming out with palmcorders and camcorders and all that kind of stuff. So I can see how 50, 60, 70 years ago, how it could be so much worse. So much more nepotism, so much more bigotry. The typical Dukes of Hazzard type of a setup. Where it's just, it's like a group of children still playing games on the schoolyard playground, but unfortunately they're not in school anymore, they're not in the playground anymore, they're in society. But they're still playing these little childish games, cops and robbers. I mean, I bet you if law enforcement only addressed actual crimes where there was injured parties, either physically injured or property was injured, I bet you if they only concentrated on that, they would probably only have one or two people a day going through the courts. If that. They'd probably have days where they wouldn't have anything on the docket whatsoever. That's how small of a fraction real actual crime is compared to what these people do. See, when they consider everything a crime, when they claim, I mean, I saw it firsthand myself, when these out of control tyrants claim that they can make shit up, they can charge you with whatever they want, whenever they feel like it. That's their attitude. They walk around like God's gift to the earth. And make it sound like if you don't toe the line and do what they say, well, they'll just make something up. They'll do whatever they have to. They're gonna make you suffer. So many of these people are. And maybe not to their families, maybe not to their friends, but to the pesky citizens. So, at this point, the only reason I'm making these recordings is just for a record. That's it. I don't expect these people to do the right thing. I don't expect them to actually be held accountable. I sure as hell don't expect any of these cunts or idiots to apologize to me. But at this point, the money's going to be apology enough. Knowing that they may lose everything because of their actions. Knowing that they may suffer as a consequence for their actions. I'm good with that. Because at least it gives them the opportunity to figure out what they did wrong. Then they can improve upon it. It gives them the opportunity to be a better person. It's too bad it had to play out like this, but I guess no one's loved them enough to hold them to a higher standard. And if I had to guess, I'd probably say that some of these people probably were problem children for their family. And so they, at some point, joined the police department or became a public servant, however you look at it. Simply just to what's the word? I can't think of the word. Not impress. That's kind of the word I'm looking for. To put on a facade to their family that they're not that troublemaker anymore. Look, they're a public servant. Look, they work for the police department now. So their family's all proud of them, and oh look, they turned their life around. They're doing something good. What their family doesn't realize is that they're using that position for destruction. No, I think after all this time, I'm still in shock that people are this dumb. But then again, like I said, I mean, hell, in the last 2 years, looking around at all the face diapers, it's pretty evident of how stupid people are. Operating out of fear, afraid of their own shadow. That's why you got these people that drive around in their cars by themselves wearing masks and gloves. I mean, what kind of mental illness would you have to be afraid of yourself in that way? Afraid to touch anything, afraid to breathe fresh air because you think you're going to get sick. I mean, how stupid can these people be? Well, I think that's pretty stupid. You know, these are the type of people that never really thought for themselves. They've been spoon fed, they've been breastfed all the information. They've never been forced to grow up and think for themselves. They just do what they're told, like good little slaves. That's probably why most of these people don't like me, because I'm not a slave. I'm not one of them. I wasn't born with that same mentality. I mean, I'll go back as far as I can remember. I was questioning everything. And quite frankly, that's probably why most people don't like me. Not that I really care. Because honestly, if I wanted a friend, I'd buy a dog. Most people out there aren't even worth my time to be friends with, because they're just backstabbers. But yeah, so at this point, in the near future, these people could be left to their own demise. And I am going to be in a much warmer, sunnier, beneficial area than this shithole. Being in an area where people have the common sense and decency not to make a bunch of extra noise in the middle of the night. Out of courtesy. Instead here, it's almost like they do it on purpose. I don't know, maybe it's all the drugs in these smaller towns. Who knows? Who knows why? I mean, it could be a whole plethora of different reasons and excuses. But what's baffling to me is typically my experience. smaller cities and smaller towns actually have been predominantly quieter. Not just noise like this, but also quieter as far as crime is concerned. The true criminals are in the government. The true criminals are in City Hall. People in uniform. Because when you have to break or violate multiple laws to hold somebody accountable for supposedly or allegedly violating one, I mean, do the ends really justify the means? I mean, anybody that would call someone else a criminal for doing the same activity that they do themselves is, I mean, hypocritical to say the least. Two-faced. I think the saddest part is that these people, especially these quota hired dispatchers, their families are probably proud of them. Oh, look, they're working for the police department. They're doing their civic duty. They're, doing what they can for the community and all this happy horse shit. When all along they don't realize that they're being lied to because their family member isn't actually being honorable or responsible. They just walk around with their uniform on, and chest puffed out, and acting like they're a hero. Fucking traitors. I have more respect for people sitting in a jail cell because at least they're honest. More honest with themselves than these public servants are. Public servants that are too incompetent to perform a proper investigation. Public servants that are too stupid to not admit their treason themselves on a recorded phone call, like Sergeant Patnock. So I guess when it's all said and done, and frankly, I really don't care what these people do with themselves. And to keep acting the way that they do, karma's going to have its way with them. If it hasn't already. These people have probably suffered repercussions in their lives because of their actions and don't even realize the correlation. But hey, in the end, it has given me a wealth of knowledge going through this experience. And with all the claims that I have written outlining the malfeasance of these people and their actions, they're going to make me pretty damn wealthy too. So when I look back on it, really, all in all, it could have been a lot worse. Going through this experience with these incompetent people, it could have been a lot worse. But I learned quite a bit. And that knowledge made me wealthy. I mean, hell, what more could I ask for, really? So I guess in a way, I'm kind of thankful that these people did what they did. Because had they not done what they did, who knows, maybe I wouldn't have learned what I've learned. Yeah, it really is satisfying to know that in the end, I'm going to win. That everything that these people did was only to make me stronger, make me more wealthy. But that's what stupid people do. They do stupid things that empower others. So, I mean, I tried to educate them. I tried to get them to do the right thing. But I guess they're just too stupid. Well, I don't guess. I know. They admitted it themselves. That's the hilarious part about it. They admitted it themselves. Yeah, so whether or not these people lose everything they own, whether or not these businesses get shut down and go bankrupt, whether or not they continue to operate and destroy the community, frankly, here pretty soon, I don't give a damn. Because if the people in the community here are happy with it and they're okay with it, hey, more power to you. But at least I don't have to live with it anymore. Because hell, at this point here pretty soon, I'm wealthy enough I can go wherever the hell I want to go. Thanks to these people. I can go buy multiple houses if I want to. I think the most hilarious part is these people are probably convinced that they did the right thing. These incompetent dispatchers that can't do their job, don't want to do their job, whatever the case might be, can't do their job.